Death by 1,000 microservices. The software industry is learning once again that complexity kills. Yeah, it does. The Church of Complexity. There is a pretty well-known sketch in which an engineer is explaining to a project manager how an overly complicated maze of microservices works in order to get a user's birthday, and fails to do so anyways. The scene accurately describes the absurdity of the state of the current tech culture. We laugh, and yet bringing this up in a serious conversation is tantamount to professional heresy, rendering you borderline unhireable. So how did we get here? How did our aim become not addressing the task at hand, but instead setting a pile of cash on fire by solving problems we don't have? The perfect storm. There are a few things in recent history that may have contributed to the current state of things. First, a whole army of developers writing JavaScript for the browser started self-identifying as full stack. Dude, this is single-handedly the greatest roast of all time. It's immediately going on to the Twitters. So people are going to think I'm shitposting, which people tend to think I only shitpost. I also quote post, to be fair. DHH Ghost. Dude, I love this one. Diving into server development and asynchronous code. JavaScript is JavaScript, right? What difference does it make what difference does it make what you create using it? User interfaces, servers, games, or embedded systems, right? Node was still kind of learning a project of one person, and JavaScript back then was deeply problematic choice for server development. Pointing this out is still green server-side developers usually resulted in a lot of huffing and puffing. This is all they knew, after all. The world outside of Node effectively did not exist. The Node way was the only way. And so, this was the genesis of stubborn, dogmatic thinking that we deal with to this day. And then, a steady stream of FANG veterans started merging into the rivers of startups, mentoring the newly minted and highly impressionable young JavaScript server-side engineers. I want you to know that the more times you identify or you have adjectives in front of the word engineer, likely the bigger mistake you're making. Just so you know. The apostles of the Church of Complexity would assertively claim that how they did things over at Google was unquestionable and correct, even if it made no sense under current context and size. What do you mean you don't have separate user preference services? This will not scale, bro. This is so good. This is so good. My favorite fact of life is that there are more startups with more servers than users. Like, that's just the reality. They have more servers dedicated than they do actual users. But it's easy to blame the veterans and the newcomers for all this. What else is happening? Oh yeah, easy money. What do you do when you are flush with venture capital? You don't go for revenue, surely. On more than one occasion, I've received an email from management asking everybody to be in the office, tidy up their desks, and look busy as a cloud of Patagonia vests was about to parade through the office. Investors needed to see explosive growth, but not in profitability. No, they just needed to see how quickly the company could hire ultra-expensive software engineers to do things. And now that you have these developers, what do you do with them? Well, they could build a simpler system that is easy to grow and maintain, or they could conjure up a monstrous constellation of microservices that no one really understands. Microservices, the new way of writing scalable software. Are we just going to pretend that the conception of a distributed systems never existed? Let's skip the whole parsing of nuances that microservices are not real distributed systems. Dang. This is such a shots fired article. So good. Back in the day when the industry was not... I really do like this because I can't tell you how many people reach for complex systems when they have nobody to serve it to. You know what I mean? They don't... Do you really need all these things just to develop a service? Like, if you're doing it for the sake of learning, so I do want to, time out. If you're doing it for the sake of learning, for the sake of understanding how complex systems are built, you should do that. Everything is not a learning exercise. You know what I mean? Not everything's a learning exercise. Sometimes you just need to build something. And now that you have seen these developers, what do you do with them? Oh yeah, we already read that. Back in the day, when the tech industry was not such a bloated farce, distributed systems were respected, feared, and generally avoided, reserved only as a weapon of last resort for a particular gnarly problems. Everything with distributed systems become more challenging and time-consuming. Development, debugging, deploying, testing, resilience. But I don't know, maybe it was all super easy now because tooling. This is actually a really good observation, which is observability into a microsystem architecture is extremely difficult. It just really is. Like, it is very, very hard to have great observability, to trace requests, to go through things. It's still really hard. Like, it's not something that's just simple. It's very time consuming. And then getting the right understanding, there's a lot to it. I can't tell you how many times I've logged onto a server at Netflix, gone to the specific instance, and looked at the Catalina log from my Groovy output, right? To find out what happened and went wrong right here. No, it's not. Services are easy. They just work. You just go on there and you just do stuff. You just go on there. They're simple. I would venture, I forgot to turn off alerts. I would venture to say that a singular item is easier than many items. Open telemetry, sure, open telemetry, but it's still it's more things. Like, you still have to put all these things in place. Like, you forget the fact that none of these problems exist until you have them all, right? And then you have to have all the items in place. There's not like a simple just jump. Open telemetry, it's just a format. I know open telemetry, that's not what I'm saying. There's still a lot to it. Debugging is non-trivial. Not only that, but now you have like this whole problem of testing. You have a staging environment. You have to reflect what is in prod and staging if you wish to do that. How do you have separate staging environments that you make sure that it's not getting destroyed? Like, there's just so much more than just the thing, right? It's not just the thing. Correlating IDs are hard. You have to make sure you're using headers. Every system propagates these headers if you want to wrap these things. Oh, staging is so bad right now. Every staging is bad. There's no staging that's good. I've had a problem at Netflix that I changed a staging-only environment flag, and I took down production. Okay? Staging and production is not easy, okay? It's very hard. You could totally screw up everything. Dude, it's just, when anyone says that distributed systems are easy, I feel like they've just never done a lot of stuff, okay? It's very easy to F yourself. It's so easy. It's so easy. It's hard to have great observability. It's hard to know what's happening. There's no, like, because here's the deal. Like, even like, you heard about all the Twitter stuff where there was like tweets going on like, we just turned off 5 more services. Does Twitter work? It's shocking that things just work. A, that's a really resilient system. Great job. But B, what was it doing? What was it? I love just seeing like what you could do at Netflix. Netflix, we have Chaos Monkey, Chaos Gorilla, and Chaos Kong running at all times. And so Chaos Kong runs every now and then and shuts off an entire region. Just turns it off. And things still keep working. It's wild what you can build and how fault tolerant it can become. But it's still, Chaos Monkey kills an individual instance. Chaos Gorilla kills an individual service. Chaos Kong kills an individual region. So US West just disappears. What happens? Right? What happens when US West disappears? Does your program still run? But you got to remember, we have like hundreds of engineers working on this. It's an expensive problem, but we have an actual reason to have it be expensive. All right, anyways, there's no standard tooling for microservice development. There's no such common framework. Working on distributed systems has gotten marginally easier in 2020s. Using Docker and Kubernetes of the world that did not magically take away inherent complexity of distributed setup. Thank you. I love referring to this summary of 5 years of startup audits, as it's packed with common sense conclusions based on hard evidence and paid insights. Let's see. The startups we audited that are now doing the best usually had an almost brazen, keep it simple approach to engineering. Cleverness for cleverness' sake was aboard. On the flip side, the companies where we were like, whoa, these folks are smart as hell, for the most part, kind of faded. That's pretty funny. Literally, complexity kills. The audit revealed an interesting pattern, where many startups experienced a short collective imposter syndrome while building straightforward, simple performance systems. There is a dogma attached to not starting out with microservices on day one, no matter the problem. Oh, this is so good. Everyone is doing microservices, yet we have a single Django monolith. Oh, thank you, baby. Very beautiful wife, by the way. Beautiful wife, beautiful wife, beautiful wife. Look at that. She made me a little bit of eggies. Little toast, little fork. What a wonderful wife. Everyone is doing microservices, yet we have a single Django monolith maintained just by a few engineers and my squeal instance. What are we doing wrong? Nothing. It's okay to start there. Misogyny. Why? I am shocked. Okay, so I kid you not. So when this happened, when I was called a misogynist, the response was, why are you afraid of women or something this? Why are you a misogynist? And I responded with, don't worry, I think the same thing of men too. And then they accused me of being like a misanthrope or something, someone who's afraid or distrusting of all humans. And I said, I don't think you know what that word even means. And then, of course, that's when I got dragged in with the whole wife bringing me food. I just genuinely appreciate it. And she's beautiful, lovely, super smart, talented, and runs a bunch of crap. So, F you, wherever you're at. Thank you, beautiful wife. A misanthropist? Yeah. So stupid. Anyways, the answer is almost nothing. Likewise, it's common for a seasoned engineer to experience hesitation and inadequacy in today's tech world. And the good news is that no, it's probably not you. It's common for teams to pretend like they're doing web scale, hiding behind libraries, ORMs, and cache, confident in their expertise. They crushed that lead code, yet they may have not even been aware of databases, database indexing basics. If you haven't indexed your own database at least once, you should. You are operating in a sea of unjustified overconfidence, waste, and Dunning-Kruger. So who is really the imposter here? There is nothing wrong with a monolith. The idea that you can't grow without a system that looks like the infamous diagram of Afghanistan war strategy is largely a myth. Yeah, that seems about a proper war strategy here. Dropbox, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Shopify, Stack Overflow, Netflix, they didn't say that. These are companies and others started out as monolithic code bases. Many have monolith at their core to this day. Stack Overflow makes it a point of pride how little hardware they need to run massive site. Shopify is still a Rails monolith. It sucks. Leveraging the tried and true risque to process billions of tasks. WhatsApp went supernova with their Erlang monolith and 50 engineers. How? It's actually 32 engineers. This sounds like somehow... Oh, they must have hired 18 since the other article I read. WhatsApp constantly keeps the engineering staff small to about only 50 engineers. Individual engineering teams are small, consisting of 1 to 3 engineers, and a team are each given a great deal of autonomy. In terms of service, what app prefers to use smaller number of servers and vertically scale each server to the highest extent possible? I like this approach actually quite a bit. I do like this quite a bit. Instagram was acquired for billions with the crew of 12. I mean, I also don't like this part because Facebook just wanted to make millions, and they knew how they were going to do it. They wanted that billions, right? Well, I mean, that's the thing is you don't necessarily need to engineer everything to the maximum. I'm taking a bite. Let's see, and do you imagine Threads was an effort involved a whole meta campus? No, they followed the Instagram model. This is the entire Threads team. It took that many people to copy Twitter's open source code base? Perhaps claiming that your particular problem domain requires a massively complicated distributed system and an open office stuffed to the gills with turbo geniuses is just crossing over into arrogance rather than brilliance. Don't solve problems you don't have. Okay, I like this. It's a simple question. What problems are you solving? Is it scale? How do you know to break it all up for scale and performance? Do you have enough data to show what needs to be separated services and why? Distributed systems are built for size and resilience. Can your system scale and be resilient at the same time? What happens if one of the services go down and comes to a crawl? Just scale it up? Yes? Well, that's a great question. What about other services? What about automatic canary analysis? How often are you releasing? How are you doing staging versus production? Services will get flooded with load. Do you have a war game, the endless permutations of things that can and will go wrong? Is there back pressure? Everyone's favorite phrase, circuit breakers, queues, jitter, sensible timeouts on every endpoint. Is there default value returnables? We call that a blue service. Are there foolproof guards to make sure simple changes do not bring everything down? The knobs you need to be aware of and tune are endless, and they are all specific to your system's particular signature of usage and traffic. This is a great statement of just how complicated these things can become, especially when you have 10 users. You have 10 users. Just put it on a machine. Just put it on a machine. Okay? One simple shared resource, $5 a month. The same price as it is to sub to your boy right here. You can get a machine and you'll be able to serve 10,000 users on that thing. Stop! Stop! The truth is that almost most companies never reach that massive size that will actually require building a true distributed system. You are cosplaying Amazon and Google without their scale, expertise, and endless resources. It is very likely just an egregious waste of money and time. Religiously follow all the steps from this article called 10 Morning Habits of Very Successful People is not going to make you a billionaire. The only thing harder than distributed systems is bad distributed systems. That is such a great statement. 90% of all companies in the world could probably just be a monolith running against a primary DB cluster with DB backups, some caches, and proxies, and be done with it. For 10% of the companies that hit planet scale, no pun intended here, Sam, it's going to be an art figuring this out. Fair. This is fair. I would argue that 90% of companies don't even need most of the things he even said there. You just need DBs, backups, and a monolith. You don't even need some caches and proxies. You probably don't even need any of that. But each team, but separate, but API. Trying to solve the distributed topology of your company's structure is a noble effort, but it almost always backfires. It is a common approach to break up a problem into smaller pieces and then solve those one by one. So the thinking goes, if you break up one service into multiple ones, everything becomes easier, right? The theory is sweet and elegant. Each microservice is being maintained rigorously by a dedicated team, walled off behind a beautiful backward-compatible versioned API. In fact, this is all so steely that you rarely even have to communicate with that team, as if the microservice was maintained by a third-party vendor. It's that simple. It's simple. If that doesn't sound familiar, that's because this rarely happens. Oh, you don't recognize that? Yeah, neither do I. I definitely don't recognize that one at all. In reality, our Slack channels are flooded with messages from teams communicating about releases, bugs, configuration updates, breaking changes, PSAs, and everyone needs to be on top of everything all the time. If this wasn't great, it's normal for one already slammed team to half-ass multiple microservices instead of doing a great job on a single one. This is another reality, is you rarely have one team, one microservice. Can we just be real here? Does that ever happen? No. Often owners, as people come and go. In order to win the race, we don't build one good race car. We build a fleet of shitty golf carts. All right, Kelsey Hightower. This is a great question. Here's my answer. I'm willing to wager a monolith will outperform every microservice architecture. Just do the math on the network latency between each service and the amount of serialization and deserialization each request. No contest. Now the question, can a giant monolith application packaged and deployed with auto-scaling models be as effective performance-wise as microservice architecture? I love the fact that that question even has to be asked. This just goes to show, like this right here. This is so true. Like you gotta think that, like, people think JavaScript object notation is fast. It's not fast. It is really slow, and it is one of the most primary ways servers communicate with each other. It's not fast. It's never been fast. You can't even make it fast. Like, it's as fast gets. We SIMD the shit out of deserialization, and it's still not that fast. What do you lose? There are multiple pitfalls to building with microservices, and often that minefield is either not fully appreciated or simply ignored. Teams spend months writing highly customized tooling and learn lessons not related at all to the core product. Here's just some of the often overlooked aspects. Say goodbye to dry. After decades of teaching developers to don't repeat yourself code, which does lead to a lot of abstractions. I'm kind of in the don't do dry, but only do dry when it's obviously should do dry, like when you do multiple of the same thing literally over and over again, then you should abstract it out, you know what I mean? That kind of dry. I'm that kind of dry guy. Let's see, it seems to just stop talking about it altogether. Microservices, by default, are not dry. With every single service stuffed with redundant boilerplate, very often the overhead of such plumbing is so heavy that the size of the microservice is so small that the average instance of a service has more service than product. So what about common code that can be factored out? Have a common library. How does the common library get updated? Keep different versions everywhere. Forceful updates regularly, creating dozens of pull requests across repositories. Keep it all in a mono repo. This comes with its own set of problems. Allow for code duplication. Forget it. Each team gets to reinvent the wheel every time. Multiple overlapping implementations of the same thing. Trademark that. It's very true. Each company going this route faces these choices, and there is no good ergonomic options. You have to choose your version of the pain. Developer ergonomics will crater. Developer ergonomics is the friction, the amount of effort a developer must go through in order to get something done, be it working on new features or resolving a bug. With microservices, an engineer has to have a mental map of the entire system in order to know what service to bring up for any particular task. What teams to talk to, whom to talk to, and what about. And you have to know everything before doing anything principle. How do you keep on top of it? Spotify, a multi-billion-dollar company, spent probably a non-negligible internal resources to build Backstage, software for cataloging its endless system and services. Yeah, I mean, this seems a little bit more overwrought. You don't need as much. I find this... So I guess, hold on. Let's undo this. When I was working in Office, this process is not that bad. When everyone's required to be in Office, it's really not that bad. When it's on Slack, it is worse. I'm calling it. The reason why is that communication's not instant. I can't sit in front of somebody and talk to them. Now, you can huddle. You can try to huddle, but they have to be at their computer. Like, there's all these hurdles that exist. I'm curious about this. I wonder how much of that is true. Or is it my perception? Anyways, this should at least give you a clue that this game is not for everyone, and the price of the ride is high. So what about tooling? The not Spotifys of the world are left with MacGyver, left with MacGyvering their own solutions. The robustness and portability of which you can probably guess. How many teams actually streamline the process of starting a YAS, yet another stupid service? This includes developer privileges in GitHub GitLab, default environment variables and configuration, CI/CD. I literally just hand rolled my own artisanal CI/CD just last week. Code quality checkers, code review settings, branch rules and protections, monitoring and observability, test harness, infrastructure as code. And of course, multiply this list by the number of programming languages used throughout the company. Maybe you have yourself a usable template or runbook. Maybe a frictionless one-click system to launch a new service from scratch. It takes months to iron out all the kinks with this kind of automation. And the best part is that it doesn't work for everybody. It works for like a very narrow set. So you can either work on your product or you can get working on tooling. Yes, is going to be the name of my next microservice. Yes. Integration tests. Haha. Lol. At every stage, microservices grind was not enough. You also forfeit the peace of mind offered by solid integration tests. Your single service and unit tests are passing, but are your critical paths still interact? Oh my goodness! But are your critical paths still intact after each commit? Who's in charge of the overall integration test suite in Postman or wherever else? Is there one? Okay, fair, potentially. I'd have to think about that one. Why is it so hard to read? I have the sweet dyslexias. And so this, me starting this channel is just me wanting to get better at reading, and I would also like to do other stuff as well. Integration testing and distributed setup is a nearly impossible problem. So we pretty much gave up on that and replaced it with another, observability. Just like microservices are the new distributed systems, observability is the new debugging in production. That's actually really funny. Surely you're not writing real software if you're not doing observability. Observability has become its own sector, and you will pay in both pretty penny and in developer time for it. It doesn't come as a plug and pay either. Oh yeah, you need to understand and implement canary releases, feature flags, etc. Who is doing that? One already overwhelmed engineer who accidentally takes down production because they accidentally put in the wrong value? Okay, just because I put in the wrong value and things went down. What about just services? What do your services need to be micro? What's wrong with just services? Some startups has gone as far to create a service for each function. That can't be real. Isn't that just like a Lambda? Is a valid question. This gives you the idea of how far gone this unchecked cargo cult is. That's strange. What do you do? Or what do we do? Starting with a monolith is one obvious choice. A pattern that could also work in many instances is trunk and branches. Where the main is meat and potatoes, monolith is helped by branch services. A branch service can be a service that takes care of clearly identifiable and separately scalable load. A CPU-hungry image resizing service makes way more sense than a user registration service. Or do you get so many registrations per second that it requires independent horizontal scaling? Do you? With your 10 users? Just 10 users going nuts? In version control, back in the day, CVS and Subversion, we rarely used master branches. We had trunk and branches because, trees. Master branches appeared somewhere along the way, and when GitHub decided to do away with their rather unfortunate naming convention, the average engineer was too young to remember the trunk branches pattern. And so the generic main default came to be. Okay? The pendulum is swinging back. The hype, however, is seeming to die down. The VC cash faucet is tightening, and so the business have been market corrected into exercising common sense decision, recognizing that perhaps splurging on web scale architects when they don't have web scale problems is not sustainable. Yeah, so this is actually a very interesting point, which is I wonder what's going to happen over the next so many years, because either something is going to exist that makes this stuff more and more easy to deal with, which is effectively like serverless or edge functions. Any of those things are attempting to make all of this easier. Or B, are we going to just actually go back to monoliths? I want that. But it's not web scale. What will you do when your Rail app monolith hits max capacity and you can't scale beyond your company? Checks notes. $94 billion market cap? It's fair. Amazon Prime Video team migrating one system from microservice to monolith. Yeah, I mean, this was just crazy. We read this article. It's on the YouTube. This one was just crazy. It was just crazy. Ultimately, when faced with the need to travel from New York to Philadelphia, you have two options. You can either attempt to construct a highly intricate spaceship for orbital descent to your destination, or you can simply purchase an Amtrak train ticket for a 90-minute ride. That is the problem at hand. Wow, I could not read for the latter half of that. I've ruined the YouTube video due to the reading. It's like I fell apart reading. I read for too long. My brain started falling apart, and now I can't do it. Dude, I had so many brain farts. The train analogy. Dude, you did great. Your guys are encouraging. You could do this. Too overwhelmed by the truth. Well, the thing that really hurts is that I've seen this a lot, and I've seen a lot of people just absolutely struggling, setting up all these services, trying to make everything happen, having all this data distribution, having all these services that can be uptime, horizontally scaled, and they're just building like the world's simplest service, and I'm just like, hey, man, put it on a machine. The name is the Primeagen.